Tonight, before you go to sleep, there is something I want you to do that will take you less than 2 minutes. You will take the Bible that sits in your home. You will open it to Psalm 23, the psalm almost everyone knows by the first line, "The Lord is my shepherd." And you will place inside the 2 open pages a specific measure of a specific kind of salt. You will close the book gently. You will leave it somewhere very specific in your home that I will tell you about. And by the 3rd morning, something will have begun to shift in the layer of your financial life that no spreadsheet and no second job and no amount of mental effort has ever been able to reach. I want to be clear with you from the first minute. I am not going to promise you that by Tuesday you will be wealthy. I am not going to tell you that a check for $1 million is going to appear in your mailbox. That is the language of people selling you something dishonest, and I am not one of them. What I am going to tell you is what I have watched with my own eyes over more than 30 years, that this specific practice, done with the precision I am about to describe, reaches into a very old and very real mechanism in our tradition, and within 72 hours, a movement begins. Small at first, sometimes so small you almost miss it, but unmistakable once you have been taught to see it. I am Rabbi Naomi. For over 30 years, I have sat inside the texts of our tradition, the Torah, the Talmud, the Tehillim, the Zohar, and the writings of the Hasidic masters of the Old World. My grandmother crossed borders with a small bundle and a smaller book of Psalms tucked inside her coat, and that book of Psalms was not a religious decoration for her. It was the single most practical object she owned. She kept certain things inside certain psalms, and salt was one of them, for reasons she had learned from her own mother, who had learned from her grandmother, in a chain of transmission that goes back long before any of us have records of it. She taught this practice to my mother in the darkest year of my mother's early marriage, when my father had lost the second of his 2 businesses within a 4-year stretch, and my mother taught it to me. You must stay with me until the final minute of this teaching. If you miss the salt, or the psalm, or the placement, or the 2 specific lines inside the psalm that do the particular work for the reversal of poverty, or the 3 morning acknowledgments that follow the 3 nights, you will have placed salt in a book, and you will have performed a beautiful ritual, and nothing will move. But if you stay, and you receive every element, you will have in your hands by the end of this video a practice that our grandmothers did in secret, in kitchens that no longer exist, and that worked for them in days far more difficult than most of ours. Before we go further, do one small thing with me right now. Type the word shuv in the comments below. Shuv is Hebrew for return, the return of what has been lost, what has wandered, what has been diverted from its rightful place. When you type it publicly, before this community, you speak the first word of the practice itself. Now I need you to hear why the ordinary ways you have been fighting your financial situation have not been working, and why it is not your fault. You have been working. You have been budgeting. You have been trying to figure out which bill to pay first and which one can wait another 2 weeks. You have been pouring everything you have into the physical layer of your life. The hours of your work, the numbers in the spreadsheet, the calculations at the kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night. In the world of the eye, this is what you are supposed to do. But our sages taught that the physical world is only the outermost layer of a 4-layer reality, and the condition of the outermost layer is always determined by the inner 3. You cannot fix poverty at the layer of the bank account. Poverty, in our tradition, is not first a financial condition. Poverty is a spiritual condition that expresses itself financially, the way a fever is not first a number on a thermometer, but an inner state that the thermometer only reports. And the mechanism of that inner state has a name. The sages called it the chov, the binding. The Arizal, the great mystical teacher of the 16th century, taught openly that when a person's channel of parnasa, of provision, has been bound, the ordinary instruments of the physical world cannot release it, because the binding is not in the physical world, it is one layer up, and the tools that reach that layer are also one layer up. Words, sacred texts, objects that have carried intention for generations. Salt is one of the oldest of those tools. There is a phrase in the book of Leviticus, in a passage about the offerings brought in the temple 3,000 years ago. Brit Melach Olam, an eternal covenant of salt. Our sages for nearly 3,000 years have asked the same question. Why salt? Why not gold? Why not oil? And the answer has been the same across every generation. Salt does not spoil. Salt does not decay. Salt preserves what it touches. Salt, when placed in a substance, draws out what is harmful and leaves what is essential. Our tradition teaches that salt is the physical sign of a spiritual principle, the emblem of that which cannot be corrupted. When placed with intention in the right text, at the right hour, with the right posture, it functions in the unseen layer of reality the way it functions in the physical. It draws out what has been binding the channel, and it preserves what has been trying to flow. Psalm 23 is the text, because it is the one psalm King David composed as a direct declaration of the ending of lack. Lo echsar, I shall not lack, not in the past, not in the present, in the future. Our sages read this psalm as the psalm of the shepherd, who knows the flock never goes hungry, because the shepherd does not work for the flock. The shepherd leads the flock to where the food already is. You, tonight, are the flock. The source is the shepherd. And this psalm, activated with salt, is the practice that our grandmothers used to remind the spiritual mechanics of the universe that they were not meant to be abandoned on a dry hillside. Let me tell you what I watched happen with my own mother, because this is the story I almost never tell publicly, and it is the reason I am teaching this practice openly for the first time this year. My grandmother came to my parents' small apartment the week my father's second business had collapsed. My mother was in her late 20s. She had been raised in a home where these practices had fallen out of use in the middle generation, a generation that had grown up assimilated, educated into thinking these were the folk superstitions of an older world. She sat with the open Bible in front of her and a small glass dish of kosher salt on the table beside it for almost 30 minutes that first night, because the part of her that had been educated into the modern world was ashamed of what she was about to do. She told me this years later. Naomle, she said, I almost did not do it. I sat there and I thought, I am a woman with a university education, and I am about to put salt in a book of Psalms because my mother told me to, as if this is the 14th century. And then she thought about the bills on the kitchen counter, and she thought about my father crying silently in the next room, and she thought about my grandmother who had walked out of Europe with almost nothing and had somehow rebuilt 3 lives with her own hands. And she said to herself, whatever my grandmother did, I will do. She did it that first night. She did it the second night. She did it the third night. On the morning of the 4th day, my father received a phone call from a man who had worked with him at the first business 7 years earlier, a man whose name he had not heard in at least 4 years. The man said he had just taken a position at a larger firm, and that the firm was looking for exactly the kind of specialist my father was, and that he had picked up the phone without really knowing why. My father went for the interview that week. He was hired within 10 days. That position became the foundation of the next 20 years of our family's life. It was not a windfall, it was a door. And my mother, until the day she died, kept a small piece of kosher salt wrapped in a white handkerchief inside her Bible at Psalm 23, and every time I visited her, the salt was there. What that story actually teaches is this. The salt did not create a job for my father out of nothing. The opportunity, the man, the phone call, all of it had been moving in the unseen layer for months, possibly longer. What the salt in the open psalm did was one specific thing. It dissolved the binding on the channel, so that what had been attempting to reach my father finally had a clear path. This is what the practice does. It is not a summoning. It is not a manifestation. It is the removal of what has been blocking what was already trying to find you. Every binding on a person's provision, the sages taught, exists in one of three places. The first is in the speech of the person themselves, in the sentences of lack they have spoken over their own life. The second is in the residue accumulated on their vessel from the eyes and words of others, the ayan hara, a real spiritual mechanism. The third is in the covenant of scarcity that may have been made, knowingly or unknowingly, by those who came before a person in their lineage. The salt in the psalm addresses all three, because salt is the emblem of the eternal covenant, and when placed inside the text that declares, "I shall not lack," it functions as the overwriting of every prior covenant of lack with a new covenant of provision. Now listen carefully, because the precision here is the entire practice. If you do this casually, it does almost nothing. If you do it with the exactness I am about to describe, you will feel the shift within the 3 days. First, the salt itself. It must be coarse salt, kosher salt, sea salt in its unprocessed form, rock salt that has not been ground to powder, not iodized table salt. The coarseness of the crystal carries, in our tradition, the weight of the covenant. You will need approximately 1 level tablespoon, not more, not less. Second, the Bible, a physical Bible, not an app, not a website, a real book with real pages in a binding that will stay closed when you close it. Any translation honest to your own language is acceptable because the work is being done at the level of the text, not at the level of the language. Third, the preparation. Before you begin, wash your hands, the right hand first, then the left, then the right again. Do not speak a single sentence of lack between the beginning of the preparation and the moment the salt is placed. If one arises in your mind, close your mouth, take 1 breath, and let it pass. Fourth, the opening of the psalm. Sit at a table where the Bible can lie open without folding. Open your Bible to Psalm 23 and let the 2 pages rest flat. Place your right hand, palm open, hovering just above the open pages, at the height of the width of your hand above the paper. Read the entire psalm aloud, slowly, from beginning to end. The voice must leave your mouth. When you reach the final word, pause for 1 full breath. Fifth, the 2 specific lines. You will return, after the full psalm, to 2 specific lines that carry the particular weight for the reversal of poverty. The first is the opening line, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not lack." Read it aloud once more, slowly, with the full kavanah, the full intention that you are speaking over the future tense of your own life. The second is the line that comes in the middle of the psalm, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies." Our sages read the word enemies here not only as human enemies, but as every force that has been working against a person's provision. You are declaring that the table is being prepared for you now, despite the forces that have been arrayed against you. Read that line aloud once more. Sixth, the placement of the salt. Take the 1 level tablespoon of coarse salt. Pour it slowly onto the open Bible, not in a pile in the center of a single page, but distributed gently across both open pages. Spread with the fingers so that the grains are in contact with the text itself. Seventh, the words over the salt. Place your right hand, palm open, just above the salt and speak quietly. Ribono shel olam, Master of the universe. As the covenant of salt is eternal, let the covenant of my provision be eternal. As this salt draws impurity from what it touches, let every binding, every residue, every inherited lack be drawn from the channel of my parnassa. As your shepherd leads the flock to where the food already is, lead me now to where what you have prepared for me has been waiting. Baruch Poteach Yad. Blessed is the one who opens the hand. Amen ve'amen. 8th, the closing. Close the Bible gently with the salt inside. Do not shake it. Do not turn it on its side. Close it flat and keep it flat. 9th, the placement in the home. The closed Bible is placed on a flat surface in the east-facing side of the room in which you sleep, or the room in which you most often sit and pray. It should not be on the floor. It should not be in the kitchen. It should not be in the bathroom. It must be in the open, not inside a drawer or a cabinet. If your home does not have an east-facing surface, choose the surface nearest to the direction of the rising sun. 10th, and this is the part almost no one teaches, the 3 mornings. On the morning after the first night, you rise, wash your hands, face east, and say one short sentence aloud. Baruch HaMeshiv. Blessed is the one who returns. Just that. On the morning after the second night, the same. On the morning after the third night, you rise, wash your hands, face east, and this time you say the first line of the psalm aloud once more. Adonai ro'i, lo echsar. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not lack. On the evening of the third day, you open the Bible. You gather the salt from between the pages into a small cloth, carefully, without spilling. You take that salt outside of your home, to a plant, a small patch of earth, the edge of a garden, a tree, and you pour it onto the earth with the words, "The earth receives what has been drawn out." Not into a sink, not into a drain, the earth. Then you return to the Bible and you place a new small piece of coarse salt, about the size of a fingertip, wrapped in a small square of white cloth, back inside the Bible at Psalm 23. That small piece stays there. It is the living covenant, the reminder to the unseen layer that this is a house in which the Brit Malach has been honored. Replace that small piece once a season with a short prayer of thanks, as my mother did for 40 years. So here is what you do today. Before the sun sets tonight, if you already have a Bible and coarse salt in your home, you begin tonight. If not, you begin tomorrow. You followed the 10 steps exactly as I have described them. You go to sleep after the first night without checking your bank account, without scrolling for distraction, without speaking one more sentence of lack over your own life. You sleep as a person who has just entered a covenant that has held other people through far worse seasons than yours. In the morning, you speak the one sentence. The next night, you do it again. The third morning, the first line of the psalm aloud, and then you wait and you watch. You are not looking for a fortune by Tuesday afternoon. You are looking for the first sign of life, an unexpected phone call, a small amount of money you had forgotten about, a door opening that you had not asked to be opened, a conversation that ends with someone saying something they did not mean to say and cannot explain. A sudden clarity in the middle of an ordinary moment about a step you have been unable to take. These are the first fruits. Acknowledge them. Speak the word Baruch aloud when they arrive. Blessed. The acknowledgement is part of the covenant. Without it, the channel begins to close again. What I have given you tonight is one practice within a complete architecture of our tradition's work with sacred text, salt, and the reversal of bound parnassa. It is a real practice, and if you do it with the precision I have described, you will feel the shift within the first week. But I want to be honest with you about what one practice alone, even done perfectly, can and cannot carry. The full tradition that my grandmother brought out of Europe and my mother lived by for 40 years contains the full architecture. The salt practice for the threshold of the home, the specific placements for the 7 Psalms that address the 7 dimensions of financial life, the words to speak over the first payment that arrives after a season of lack, and the sealings that protect what has arrived so that it does not quietly leak out again. I have gathered all of it, with the Hebrew, the transliteration, the translation, the exact timings, the postures, and the commentary of the sages that teaches the mechanism behind each one, into a single resource. It is not a collection of rituals. It is the operating plan of a household built on the covenant of Parnassah. If you are serious about not only reversing one season of poverty, but building the kind of household that our grandmothers built, the kind that held through persecution, through exile, through economic collapses that shattered nations around them, you will not wait until your situation becomes more desperate than it already is today. You will move now, while the clarity of this teaching is still awake in you. The link is in the description below this video. Everything is there. Now hear me, because this next part is what undoes more people than any other part of the practice. Within the first 72 hours, sometimes before the 3rd morning even arrives, a test will appear in your life. Let me tell you exactly what it will look like, so you do not mistake it. A bill will arrive that feels heavier than it should. A piece of news will come that feels like the opposite of what you have been praying for. A person in your life will say something that triggers every old pattern of scarcity in you. Something will tighten, and a voice inside your own head will tell you that the practice has not worked, that you have wasted your time, that putting salt in a book was absurd, and that the world is simply as it is and cannot be changed. Listen to me now. That voice is not the voice of honest reality. That voice is the last pull of the binding as it is being released. In the spiritual mechanics of our tradition, when a hove is being dissolved, there is almost always a final resistance, a final pull on the tether before the tether lets go. That final pull is the test of the vessel. Every person I have watched walk through this practice has met that test, in some form, within the first 3 to 5 days. The ones who received kept the practice. The ones who stopped at the test did not. That is the only difference between them. Do not cancel your own arriving movement with your own mouth. Do not speak death over your own breakthrough in the moment the test arrives. Say, quietly, Baruch HaMeshiv, blessed is the one who returns, and continue. The test passes within 48 hours of its arrival, and what tends to follow it is significantly larger than anything that came before. One final thing before I let you go. What I have placed in your hands tonight is not a trick, and it is not a decoration, and it is not a piece of folklore from a world that is gone. It is a living covenant that has carried my own family through hours I do not like to think about, and that has carried other families quietly across centuries of storms. You are now a keeper of it. Share this video with one person you know who is carrying a financial weight in silence, who has stopped telling anyone what is actually happening inside their home, who would never ask for help, but who would receive this teaching if it arrived tonight through a small act of kindness from you. When you become the channel for this practice to reach another soul, the sages taught that the merit returns to your own practice in ways you will feel, even if you cannot trace exactly how. If you have not yet subscribed to this channel, subscribe now and turn on the notification bell. Next week, I am going to teach the specific practice of the threshold, the salt practice for the doorway of your home that seals the Ayin Hara against you before it ever enters, so that what has begun to return to you does not quietly leak out again within weeks. Based on what I know about the hour we are living in, you cannot afford to miss it. And if anything tonight reached something real in you, press the like button before you leave. It tells the platform to carry this teaching to another soul sitting tonight with a Bible closed on a shelf and a small box of salt in the kitchen. And maybe tomorrow that soul will open the Bible, and maybe within the 3 days will feel the first movement they have felt in a very long time. May the covenant of salt you enter tonight hold you, as it has held the women and men of my family and countless other families before us. May every binding on your provision dissolve this very week, and may the table that has been prepared for you since the beginning of this year, which has been waiting for a vessel with a clear channel, find that vessel in you, finally, starting tonight. Shalom, Chavarim. Shalom.